Uhuru. Uhuru. Just waiting on people to get here. Very excited. Come on out your house. Oh, Uhuru, Paula. Uhuru. Also, if you join, can you please let me know that you hear me, because I'm, not sure. I just want to make sure the microphone is working. So just, say that you can hear me in the comments. And I want to welcome everybody who is joining. I see CC Bar, which means that's Hallie. Uhuru, Hallie. Uhuru. Oh, Uhuru Boston, because they have an entire viewing party today. So that's exciting. Uhuru. Really appreciate Boston comrades for, this is the second time they are conducting. Oop, thank you. Thank you. Uhuru, Uhuru. Thank you. Yes, you guys can hear me. But really, again, I want to salute Boston for, their second time organizing for our webinar. I really appreciate it so much. Uhuru, Uhuru, all to the 7 other comrades. I'm looking forward to, knowing who's all present today. Uhuru, Vicky Lou, thank you. Bekura, I hope I'm saying that right. Bekura, Uhuru Casey, the best secretary in town. Uhuru, just moved to St. Louis. Uhuru. So I'm going to wait for, just a few more people to join the live. I know that people will be joining the live throughout, this discussion. Also, if you're online, please share this stream, because whoever you're friends with is going to see this stream. They need to be a part of this discussion as well. So make sure that you are pushing it out there, sharing it out for the people to view, because this is a very important discussion that we're going to be engaged in today. And Huru Jasan, I see you. But we're going to be having, an amazing discussion today, of course, around the title, around the topic, African and Indigenous liberation. And it's a very timely discussion. Obviously, we are 2 days or, a day and a half away from this genocidal holiday that they call that, this, the U.S. white power calls Thanksgiving. And so that's why we're having this discussion in a timely fashion regarding African and Indigenous liberation, and how that ties into the Justice for the Three Drowned Black Girls campaign, because it all is, it's all connected. You can't separate one thing from the other, because it's all colonialism. It's all a part of the colonial contradiction. And so we're going to be discussing that today. I really want to welcome you all. This is our second episode to our newly launched webinar series for the Justice for the Three Drowned Black Girls campaign. And just to overview, what these web series are for, it's political education. It's, changing the narrative and being able to put out this case, the case of, the case of the Three Drowned Black Girls campaign, to put out mothers like Kunde Mwamvita, who is a powerhouse of the African working class. And it's also to be able to support the campaign. It's, it's our ability to fundraise and make the legal fees to not just win on the grounds politically, but also win, in the courtroom. And so this is what you're supporting when you're tuned onto this. So it's not your average webinar. So I really appreciate everybody coming on. I got Robert, Uhuru, Penny Hess. I got Jackson. Did I say Evan? No, I don't think I said Evan. Did I say Star? I don't think I said Star, but Uhuru Star, Uhuru comrades. We have Bob, Hallie, Sam, Steve, David, Amanda, and Emma, and soon to be Janet. So Uhuru comrades in Boston, Uhuru Kobina. Uhuru, thank you all so much for tuning in. And I also know that Gainesville is having a viewing party as well. I just want to say that I just got back from the amazing All African People's Development and Empowerment Project convention, 10-year anniversary convention in Huntsville, Alabama. And it was phenomenal, life-changing, even just to see the victories of the party, to see the victories of APDEP. Salute to the leadership of, Aisha Fields, who's the international director of APDEP, and to the amazing IEC that, she has pulled together to make the work of APDEP happen, to see the vision of APDEP become a reality for the African nation, for building Project Black Ankh. It was an amazing experience. And then to close out, we had Days in Solidarity, the final Days in Solidarity with African People event in Huntsville, Alabama, which was, again, amazing. So I'm coming from that and coming right into this, and I'm just super, super excited. So Uhuru, Diane, and the Gainesville viewing party, let me know who's all in attendance. I really want to shout them out. Uhuru, Kristen, Jenny, I'm very excited. So happy to have you guys on the live. Again, share. Put this out there. Getting a lot of hearts and likes, so really appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and jump into this discussion around, the topic of African and Indigenous liberation. And again, I said it's timely because we are, in a few days, there is this, this U.S. holiday that is largely celebrated, really amongst everyone in this country and in various places like Canada. They apparently have their Thanksgiving in October. And, and then a lot of the times, you don't have to be like a rocket scientist or even like deep into political work to know the history, the true history of what this holiday even represents. And they'll have you think, like, I know just growing up in elementary school in these colonial schools, they'll have you thinking that, Thanksgiving was the day that, pilgrims are colonizers. They'll have you thinking that these white people, had this friendly interaction, this friendly feast with indigenous people, that, the indigenous people just, taught them how to work the land and brought all these, all the foods and things that they all helped share to create. And then they sat down and had a bountiful feast and laughed and had, so much fun. And you think, okay, well, if that's really the case, then what at one point did this jolly feast turn into a near decimation of an entire population of people? If that's really the case, then why are indigenous people forced onto concentration camps and, they don't own their own land. They don't own this land at all. And, if that's really the case, but of course we know that's not true. And, we know that not to be the case because of not only how the reality is playing out, but because we know how white people even got here. We know how Europeans got to this country, the so-called the U.S., this illegitimate country, which is, it's not a country, it's a prison of nations. And in that prison are indigenous and Mexican people who are the original custodians of this land. And, so we can't be confused about that. And it's a very interesting topic, to bring up at the dinner table, but I mean, it's the truth. It's a horrible, gory truth about the reality of the birth of the U.S. and that it wasn't some peaceful dinner that, colonizers engaged in with indigenous people. It was slaughter. It was death. It was it was genocide. That's what it was. And, indigenous people remember that to this day, and they remember it every day that they, go out into, these so-called communities, they're concentration camps, and they go out and they don't own any of the land. They don't own any of the land that belongs to them. That is their rightful land, that this is their home. And they go out on these concentration camps that they're forced onto and have to experience that reality every single day. So, and I mean, we could go on and on about how, what colonialism looks like, what genocide looked like against indigenous people. I mean, well, one, we all know this process was instigated by, Christopher Columbus when he, landed in the Caribbean, when white people desperately trying to save themselves from, the plague and feudalism and all the horror that they were experiencing in Europe, in a desperate attempt in search of seasoning, because that's how desperate they were, in search of nutmeg, this whole process was, instigated by this person named Christopher Columbus, who was said to have discovered America. That's what you learn in colonial education system, that this white person discovered America, and it was all fireworks and happy days from there. Obviously, that's not the case. White people, Europe was trying to save itself from death and destruction and all just craziness in Europe, based on the conditions. Again, like I said, feudalism, half the population in 4 years dying from this plague. This is what Europe was engaged in trying to save themselves from. And this is in turn why, indigenous people came under attack, and a genocide, has been placed upon indigenous people, not just historically, but even today. And, this is also why the assault on Africa, this is why Africa was attacked, why Europe attacked Africa, not for some, the gold and the glory and spreading the word of the Lord, but it was to steal, all the resources of African and indigenous people, and to create, it was the birth of the white identity. It was to build Europe and to build, what now is the US, to which white people and white power controls. And, that's the relationship that we have with the system as African and indigenous people. And again, could go on about the crimes that have been committed against indigenous people. There were bounties placed on the scalps of indigenous people by Europeans. People would, white people would, put a bounty for, so much gold or so much silver on the scalps of indigenous people. And they called that, this horrible term, redskins. And so now when you see a football team or, any of these teams called the Redskins, they're talking about the history of this country. They're talking about the history of the birth of the U.S., and a part of that birth was scalping the heads of indigenous people. And we can even talk about like colonial education. Like when you talk about forced assimilation, where indigenous people had to shed themselves of their culture, their names, they had to do their hair different, they had to start bleaching their skin, and they were forced, into these schools and separated from their families, and all kinds of horrible crimes committed against indigenous people on top of the near decimation of them. White people, in an attempt to save themselves, brought over all their damn diseases and killed, some part of the indigenous population just through disease alone, killing indigenous people, and basically spreading just all of the violence, all of the torture, everything, that Europe had to offer, just impose that on indigenous people. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, because what indigenous people experience, have experienced historically and today, the genocide on, the heads of indigenous people, it goes hand in hand with the African liberation struggle. And I'm sorry for anybody who doesn't know me, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Akile Anai, and I'm the chair of the Justice for the Three Drowned Black Girls campaign. And if you don't know about the campaign, it was started as a result of the March 31st, 2016 murders of 3 African teenage girls, Dominique Battle, Lanai Mill, and Ashanti Butler, by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. And this type of horrendous murder against colonized Africans is only the kind of murder that you can see inside the social system built on the oppression, on the enslavement of African people. And I'm also a member of the African People's Socialist Party, and our party has complete and total unity with the struggle for indigenous liberation. In fact, we have a profound history with the struggle of indigenous liberation, and even history with organizations such as Indo Barrio, and have always really saluted and stood in solidarity with the struggle, right, for indigenous people to have their land back. So in this webinar, we're going to be reading from the Burning Spear. Right here, Burning Spear, only $1, burningspear.com. If there's nobody in your area to sell them to you, otherwise, you got a branch in your area of the Uhuru movement, Uhuru Solidarity Movement, in Pedum, what have you, they should all have the Burning Spear, $1. The the oldest revolutionary newspaper in existence. We're going to be reading an article from The Burning Spear, and it was written in 2010, but we just fast forward and look at the conditions today, and they have not changed. And we're going to be looking at this article because it talks about, the party's stance when it comes to Indigenous liberation. And we're going to be, just discussing also, again, how it all ties in together. And we're going to be reading an article about a young Indigenous boy that was shot and killed by a sheriff in Wisconsin. And obviously, just through that, this announcement alone, you can see how it is all connected. So, said it messed up a bit. I'm sorry, comrades. I'm just going. I'm not even seeing the comments. Uhuru. But Casey just texted me and said everything is okay. So I'm assuming everything is okay. All right. So comment, let me know if everything is okay from y'all's end. If y'all can see and hear now, I'm self-critical. I'm just going and didn't even see the comments. But I appreciate y'all's feedback. And I'm going to go ahead and get into this article titled U.S. Colonialism Attacks Mexican Indigenous People in Arizona. This was written in 2010. Just as the white settler apartheid regime in South Africa used black police to downpress their own people, so does the U.S. and the state of Arizona use Mexican indigenous police in the same way. On Friday, April 23rd, Arizona Governor Jan Brewer signed into law SB 1070, vicious white nationalist legislation designed to attack the indigenous Mexican workers from whom Arizona and the rest of occupied Mexico was stolen by white colonizers over the past 500 years. The law authorizes Arizona police to stop any Mexican person anywhere, anytime, and demand that they show immigration documents. And by the way, this is the era of everyone's beloved President Barack Hussein Obama. So, everybody's afraid of Trump because of the wall getting built and immigration ban and all this kind of stuff. Well, Obama was one of the biggest purveyors of violence against indigenous and Mexican people, deporting the most out of any U.S. president, deporting the most indigenous and Mexican people off of this land. So, for everybody who is still holding on to Obama and, hates Trump and is afraid of Trump, Obama was doing this well before Trump. He laid the foundation for Trump. So, anyway, the law authorizes Arizona police to stop any Mexican person anywhere, anytime, and demand that they show immigration documents. If a Mexican worker does not produce the colonial papers, they are guilty of the crime of trespassing on their own stolen land and will be deported across the false imperialist border imposed on them by the U.S. So indigenous Mexican people have to show papers of being a so-called citizen of this land, otherwise they're committing a crime. How in the hell do we go from a peaceful dinner collabo of indigenous and pilgrims, eating, and having if that's, like I said, if that's truly the case, if that's what happened, during this period of time, how the hell did we get to indigenous people who own this land have to show papers and proof that this is their land? So just the whole peaceful dinner crap that we learn about, and that's how this whole holiday was started, obviously is a lie. But yeah, just imagine, I guess as an African, you don't really have to imagine this. This is our reality every single day. But, the real, the colonizers, the real foreigners on this land are the ones who don't have to show no papers, are the ones who get to create the laws to say that you got to have papers. But you came over here as a result of trying to save yourself and gave birth to your own identity. But you making somebody else show papers when they are the original custodians of this land? How crazy is white power? Anyway, let me go on. SB 1070, that's the law that was put in place by white power, is no different than the past laws of occupied Azania, South Africa, under the system of apartheid, where African workers were forced to show passes to the settler police at any time on stolen African land. This brutal Arizona law criminalizing the Mexican population is supported by 70% of Arizona's white population. The law legitimizes the colonial violence regularly carried out by white vigilantes the sheriff's departments, and the vicious U.S. immigration forces known as the ICE. The passage of SB 1070 is a symptom of imperialism in crisis, fighting its last-ditch battle for white people and white power to keep this stolen land at the expense of the indigenous people who are chasing their stolen resources across the imposed border. This part of genocide began when Christopher Columbus first landed in the Caribbean in 1492, and it instigated the slaughter of hundreds of millions of indigenous people. The genocide of the owners of what today is called North and South America goes hand in hand with the enslavement of hundreds of millions of African people whose stolen labor was also part of the foundation of this parasitic system of capitalism that gives white people opportunity, prosperity, and democracy at our expense. The fact that the law was signed by a white female governor, this is very interesting, okay? Because you have this huge, white women's feminist movement just bursting at the seams right now. And, these white feminists were nowhere to be seen when these African teenage girls were murdered, or when this African mother, Kunde Mwamvita, is being slandered. White women are nowhere to be found. And it's this idea that somehow the oppression of white women is the same as the oppression of African people and even indigenous people. And that's obviously not the case. And the reality is white women sit on the pedestal of the oppression of African people. And they facilitated, like this article says, are facilitating acts of genocide against African indigenous people. So that's why we say, white women, you're not safe. You owe reparations too. You sit on the backs of African and indigenous people, African and colonized people in this country and around the world. That's the reality and the legacy of white women. You participated. Your hands are both. And, that's evident even in, this article right here. The fact that the law was signed by a white female governor exposes the imperialist complicity of the white women's movement spawned by the militancy of the African and Chicano liberation movements of the 1960s. So white women even get their whole struggle, from African and indigenous, movements of the 1960s. It's literally like a hijacking of it and then taking it from a revolutionary trajectory and then taking it onto a path of white women want white power just as equally as white men. Instead of struggling for solidarity with the liberation of African and oppressed peoples on whose backs the oppression of white women rests, the white women's movement has worked for equality with white men in carrying out the colonial policies against indigenous, African, and colonized peoples. The African People's Socialist Party recognizes unconditionally that this land belongs to the indigenous people of this hemisphere, period. The party's line is not that we want sections of this land when we're free African people, because we've been here long and, no. Africa for Africans, those at home and those abroad, that is our land. And this land belongs to indigenous people. And if indigenous people want to open up a relationship with African people to live here, and, open that up for the possibility of the people around the world, that's their right. But, our line, the party's line, the African People's Socialist Party, is that this land belongs to indigenous people. That cannot be debated. We have, something like 12 million square miles of beautiful, rich, vast land called Africa, So this land belongs to indigenous, and that just needs to get in people's heads. We stand in solidarity with the right of indigenous people to their land and their resources and the right to resist their oppression by any means necessary. By any means necessary. No one gets to dictate how indigenous people struggle for their own liberation. And, the African People's Socialist Party understands that freedom, that white power is holding on to its reign by any means necessary. So that means African and colonized people have to fight for their freedom and to kill white power, with anything that we have, by any means necessary. So the APSP calls on white people to abandon their stance as brutal colonizers and stand in solidarity with indigenous people struggling for the return of their land and resources. And that is the only, right stance that white people can take. And it's not even because there's also this thing where white people will have okay, well, I'm not going to celebrate Thanksgiving. I'm going to celebrate unthanksgiving, or I'm going to celebrate, national, Indigenous Sorry Day or something like that, where white people, go out and dress like indigenous people and then say sorry. No, the stance is reparations. The stance is reparations. White people owe reparations to African people, and they owe this land back to indigenous people. You got to get off of this land, and that is the correct stance. It's not a stance that you take like, okay, well, I'm sorry for what happened, but okay, I'm not going to rectify the colonial contradiction. No, your stance has to be reparations to African and indigenous people and the return of indigenous land back, or it's not a genuine stance in solidarity. So, reading that article and learning and understanding, the party's line around the question of indigenous liberation. And when we talk about African liberation, we're talking about white power. And white power exists all around the globe. White power has, there is barely any space left on this planet that white power has not, assaulted and is not trying in the process to assault. It'd go even so far as, assaulting and extracting all the resources of the ocean and, even flying up into space and colonizing outer space. Like, that is how vicious and desperate white power is. And when you're talking about white power, you're talking about a social system, talking about imperialism, you're talking about colonialism, you're talking about parasitic capitalism. And it's important to understand where all of that gets its basis. And we're talking about a global system, a global economic system of parasitic capitalism that's born on the assault that we're talking about right now, on the genocide of indigenous people and the enslavement of African people. The first commodity of capitalism being an African human being. That's the basis for this entire system. And so, the revolution, the African Revolution, calls for, an end to parasitic capitalism. It calls this system, and when you have parasitic capitalism, that's the foundation of all, the world economy. When you're talking about that, and then you go to the African liberation movement, and we're saying that we want to overturn capitalism, we want to overturn colonialism, we want to overthrow imperialism and be a free people. We're talking about a revolution of the world, of the planet Earth. That's what the African liberation is. That's what the African Revolution is. And another thing is that the African People's Socialist Party doesn't believe in any form of oppression. When the African Revolution succeeds, and we will see a world without oppression of anyone. It is, it's liberating the planet Earth. And that means everybody who's in it. And there's this, always this idea like, oh, you only talk about African people. Well, yeah, damn right, I'm African, so I talk about African people. But that it's this idea that the African Revolution is isolated from the rest of the world and the rest of the struggles of the, that the world is engaged in. That's not true. The African liberation movement, the African Revolution is the center of it, because the center of white power is parasitic capitalism, and parasitic capitalism is born from the enslavement of African people. When Africa seizes our land and our resources and state power over our own lives to then determine the fates of our oppressors, this is why our line is the land has to go back to indigenous people. That's all encompassing in the African Revolution. So African indigenous liberation is not two separate entities. It's the same exact thing. It's all connected, because the rest of the world can be free when African people are free. I mean, that's why, even in the past, we see these tremendous revolutions, but the conditions, either end up staying the same or worsening over a period of time. Because African people, the central question has not been resolved. The central conflict has not been resolved. That's African people have to be free, and this system of parasitic capitalism has to go. That can't be up for debate. It has to go. And then the rest of the peoples of the world, colonized people of the world, will see victory. And, that has to be widely understood. And that, it's so much bigger, it's literally, like I said, liberation of the entire planet Earth itself, because it's all dominated. Almost every inch of it is dominated by white power. And, it has to go. And it goes with the overthrowing of this colonial system. It has to go. Because in this colonial system, you'll put your child in a school that will tell you to uphold a man named Christopher Columbus and to celebrate, the genocide of indigenous people, and to celebrate this illegitimate country. Meanwhile, while white people get to live that reality, colonized African and indigenous people in this country and around the world are catching hell. Are catching so much hell. So, I'm gonna kind of jump to some comments. I'm seeing, I want to just read some, comments from the people, want to interact with y'all. I just really appreciate y'all just, staying, tuning in to this webinar, supporting the Campaign for Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls. And, because this is a very important discussion to have, again, and amazing political education, of the African People's Socialist Party. And I'm looking at, some comments. Well, I'm just going to say who's on. Uhuru, too. Oh, I see Deanne Lewis, Jason Rodriguez, F. Columbus, my sentiments exactly. Samantha Lynn, Uhuru, requiring IDs continues to this day in my hometown in Jacksonville, Florida. African men are criminalized for no good reason. Right on. Ricky says Uhuru, and Uhuru Dexter, Uhuru Nikki, Uhuru Jake, Betty, Walia. I just want to say shout out to the Committee for Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls. We are located all throughout. We are in Florida. We are, now in St. Louis, in Boston and New Jersey. Shout out to Casey, Dexter, Walia, and Clarissa for just being an amazing committee and putting this webinar together. And I'm going to get back into it now, but I just wanted to interact with you guys really quick. Uhuru. Yes, freedom in our lifetime. The revolution will succeed. Right on, Betty. Uhuru. So I also just wanted to, talk about how the whole, the question of the Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls campaign ties into all of this. And, by now it should be pretty apparent. I mean, when we're talking about colonialism, we're talking about the worst crimes that could be committed ever in human history. The assault on Africa and the enslavement of African people by far is the worst crime committed in human history. And it continues, it plays itself out to this day. Colonialism is still alive and well. People have this idea that colonialism has ended. Colonialism is here, in this country, in Africa, and in various places around the world. People are still being colonized and exploited, and their resources are still being extracted, from their countries. This is still a reality that people are living every day. And a part of colonialism is the part of the state that acts to carry out the will of white power. And so, of course, when we were talking about police murdering African and indigenous children, we're seeing colonialism in full effect. And it's not just some okay, well, this thing happened in the past. No, genocide is happening now. Genocide is happening right now. A genocide was committed on March 31st, 2016, when they stole the lives of Dominique, Lanai, and Ashanti from the African nation. When the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department committed that act of murder. That was genocide, and that's all a product of this system of colonialism. It's not something that's in the past. It is happening right now. White power, the sheriff's department did the bidding of white power. It did exactly what it was supposed to do when they murdered those girls that night. And that's why it all ties in. African people have to be free. African people have to be free because no African mother should have to bury her child ever again. Especially not due to white power state violence imposed on the African community. This is why the African liberation struggle, it all goes in together. This is not some isolated case. Africans are being murdered all the time by the police. All the time by the police. This isn't just some isolated case. This is a testament to the fact that African people have to be free. That this whole system has to be overturned. Colonialism has to go. Parasitic capitalism, imperialism has to go. And, the last article I'm going to read is one about this indigenous boy who was shot and killed by a sheriff's deputy in Wisconsin. And, the media, of course, white power media, works in the interest of the system. So, and just like in the case of the 3 drowned black girls and Kunde Mwavita, what they did was they slandered these girls and criminalized them and kind of basically justified the police killing them and slandered the entire African community. And so, we're going to sum this article up, but it's going to be a lot of justifying, why the deputy did what he did. So, Wisconsin boy shot by deputy called 911 and gave a description of himself. An 8th grade boy, 8th grade, who was fatally shot by a sheriff's deputy in northern Wisconsin called 911 to report a man with a knife, but then gave emergency dispatchers a description of himself, investigators said Saturday. So, and they say an 8th grade boy. This is not just an average boy. This is not a white boy. This is an indigenous boy. An indigenous child was shot and killed. An 8th grade indigenous child was shot and killed by the police, not just a white boy in general. No such thing. It was an indigenous colonized boy. And they don't say it in here, but in the previous article that was released around this case, you have the sheriff saying that he sees this 14-year-old boy and claims that he's a man. And we see that all the time. They always say, they said Tamir Rice was a man when in 0.2 seconds, they rolled up and shot and killed him on that playground. And African children we're never children. We're always, aggressive, seemingly dangerous, huge beings. We're not children. So according to this sheriff's deputy, a 14-year-old child looked like a grown man. So an Ashland County Sheriff's deputy shot 14-year-old Jason Perro outside the boy's home on Wednesday after the teenager approached the deputy with a large butcher knife and refused numerous commands to stop it, according to the Wisconsin Department of Justice. The shooting occurred on the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Reservation, a sprawling wooded area about 300 miles north of Madison. Authorities said evidence shows the boy had been despondent in recent days. Investigators said the boy twice lunged at Deputy Brock while the deputy was trying to retreat. Brock fired, hitting the boy twice, according to the Justice Department, which is investigating the incident. Brock, who has worked for the sheriff's office for about a year, was interviewed by agency officials and is on paid administrative leave. Investigators had previously released few details about what led up to the shooting, saying only that deputies were responding to a call about a male subject walking down the street with a knife around 11:40 a.m. Perro's grandparents told the Associated Press, that's the the news article on Friday that the boy who lived with them had come home from school with the flu Wednesday morning, but they didn't know why he later left the home. Relatives questioned whether he had a knife. Authorities said a knife was found at the shooting scene, but they also, they've historically have always police always plant evidence on dead African and Indigenous people all the time to justify murders. I mean, we saw that happen here in St. Pete when they killed Alton Witchard. They said, oh, he had a gun, but then no witnesses saw a gun, but then all of a sudden his dead body had a gun next to it. And also Anthony Lamar Smith in St. Louis, and just various cases all the time. There is guns, drugs, all these things planted by the police, and visibly so. And of course, that's used to justify the murder of colonized people. The teen's grandfather, Alan Perro, told the AP that he and his wife had raised the boy since he was a year old. He said his grandson went to school Wednesday morning but came back to the house feeling nauseous. The grandparents weren't home, but Jason's uncle was, and said the boy was watching TV. The uncle was downstairs doing laundry when the boy apparently left. Perro said investigators searched the home and the family discovered a dull butcher knife was missing. The boy's mother and other relatives have said they're not convinced Jason had a knife. His grandfather said that even if the boy did, maybe he was carving, but maybe he was doing something, but he'd never hurt a fly, never in his life. So just reading this article, one, I just want to say that this 14-year-old boy could or could not have, may or may not have had a knife. But in the incident that he did, this is a 14-year-old boy. Let's say Perro was lunging at a white deputy in a concentration camp on stolen land, and you are this white cop staring this 14-year-old Indigenous boy on his land. You have to look at that relationship. You have to look at the relationship of this armed white sheriff's deputy while Indigenous people are forced onto these concentration camps, living in the most brutal conditions. We're talking about, people who have been reduced to, and not just concentration camps, by the way, are strategically located so that they're on the most barren, pieces of land so that it's almost impossible to garden and grow and crop and all those kinds of things. Number one. Number two, you're talking about, Indigenous communities where suicide and alcoholism rates are skyrocketing because of colonialism. And then you have this 14-year-old child who may or may not have had a knife, but even if he did, all acts of resistance of the colonized is valid. It's resistance. Because this Indigenous boy is colonized. His land has been stolen from him. No matter what he was doing. Number one, of course, this Indigenous boy did not deserve to be dead. That's the reality of colonialism. But he does not deserve to be dead, regardless of if he lunged at this officer or not. White people all the time, shoot at, try to run over, do all these crazy things to police, and all the time, police find a way to bring white people in alive and unscathed. That is not the case when it comes to colonized African Indigenous people. Because the state has a certain function, to protect the interests of white power and white people. And in order to protect those interests, you have to kill African and Indigenous people. You have to do that in order to maintain, white life. You have to do that. So, of course, and then this is how it's all related. This is how the struggle for African Indigenous liberation is related. African Indigenous people are being gunned down, the modern day lynching, if you will, and this is a reality that we're confronted with as colonized people. And again, this is why the system has to be overturned. It has to be overturned. Because, no 14-year-old Indigenous boy should walk down the street and have to fear that his life's going to be taken away from this alien, foreigner, white person with, armed to the teeth with all kinds of guns to make sure that, he can never to make sure that he can never be free, to make sure that his people can never be free. You know, but this is the reality that it is that we're confronted with, and why, again, the struggle of African and Indigenous liberation, it all ties in hand. All right, so I really want to hear from you guys. I'm going to read a few comments from the comment section. If you guys have any questions, please start asking them right now. I would love to answer any questions. We have a brief Q&A, and then we're going to go into appeal. So please, I'm going to read some of these comments. Please put your questions in. I'll be happy to take some. We have. One second. All right. We have Nikki Nichols. We've been oppressed far too long by their false constitutional laws. They govern the people with scare tactics, with fear. Mental chains hold us down as well. I mean, you're talking about a whole system that came into existence with and maintains itself through worse kinds of violence. And it is true. We've been oppressed for far too long. 600 years is far too long for anyone to be oppressed, for anyone. I mean, no one should have to be oppressed, but 600 years is absolutely far too long. And, the laws, these so-called laws, are just opinions of the ruling class. Who controls the state? Who gets to put a law in place? You have white people who have created these laws. Again, the law of, indigenous people having to show these papers, and if they don't, then they're committing some kind of crime. Who put that crime in place? That's white power after they've already colonized your land. And these are the people who get to make the laws, who get to send people to jail. This is why we say it's all illegitimate. It's all illegitimate. White power does not get to dictate the lives of African and Indigenous people, colonized people. It's illegitimate. So, all right, gonna just really appreciate that comment, Nikki. Let me go to okay, y'all, hold up. It's coming in fast. 1 second. All right, so somebody wants to know more about the case of the 3 drowned Black girls. And again, I mean, it's a horrendous colonial murder of 3 African teenage girls. And, it's this whole story that the sheriff's department, lied and created. And they have done this historically, in the history of the sheriff's department in Pinellas County in particular. We're located in St. Petersburg, Florida. So Pinellas County Sheriff's Department is notorious for murdering African people. And in this particular case, they chased and corralled these girls, down a winding path into a pond. And it was 17 sheriff's deputies standing around as, these 3 girls were in the car and their car was sinking. And, 17 sheriff's deputies, all trained as first responders. First responders means they're equipped to water rescue. And they all just sat and watched and laughed as these girls drowned. And, it's just a horrible colonial murder. And just, but these sheriff's deputies sat and watched them. And they chased them, sat and watched them. And then afterwards, shortly afterwards, they go on this slander campaign before they even get to the mothers and talk to them. And by the way, they viciously attack the mothers. But before they even do that, they're out, trying to push this narrative out, this story out there, talking about and slandering the African community, saying they deserve to die because of XYZ reasons. So, for more information around the case, you can go to 3drownedblackgirls.org. You can also check out, just various articles and videos and things on this page that you guys are tuned into right now, just for more information around this case. But again, this is all a part of, the colonial contradiction. This is how colonialism plays itself out in the murder of African people. And it doesn't, it's not even like, okay, African people were brought, stolen and brought to this land to work for free and build a whole economic system. But then we have horrendous crimes committed against us as well. I mean, being lynched, okay. Okay, I'm gonna, Casey, if you can do your job in like blocking people, thank you. But yeah, this is a part of the clone contradiction. Okay, let me see if there is okay, so Chidinma, indigenous people. Okay, so I want to actually say something about that because, all around the world, okay, because we're saying that these crimes have been committed, but it's not to say that African, indigenous, and colonized people all around the world aren't resisting, because they are. And, the resistance is, we've been resisting for 600 years, and it's increasing right in this period of time. In the crisis of imperialism, it's increasing because the majority of the peoples on the planet who are oppressed by the system are saying we no longer will accept being oppressed. This will no longer be our reality. And the resistance is real. You had, the other day, Mexican people, killed some border patrol agents, and in Palestine, they're killing Israeli occupiers, Israeli settlers, killing, and they're supposed to be the officers or whatever, in this illegitimate state called Israel in Palestine. The Palestinian people are, taking back their land by any means necessary, and, they killed those Israeli officers. I'm going to say resisted against, and even in this, in this country, African people are, you have these cases where pigs are falling like flies, because African people will no longer, like, you see a cop, your life is in danger, we got to fight back, we have to fight back. And of course, we say that organization has to be a critical component to this, because it just killing colonizers. It doesn't do anything if it's not it doesn't have a revolutionary trajectory. There is no to what end. You can off a bunch of pigs, but then there is no foundation or anything for the masses to come to, and then the people who go out and do this on their own end up being caught by the state. And so we say, bring that to the African Revolution. Let's get organized, and let's do this together. Let's figure out a strategy, which the African Socialist Party and the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement have already established, and that's why even campaigns like Through Brown Black Girls exist. Oh, it says I'm echoing. Okay. All right. I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties, if there is any. Well, obviously there are. I'm self-critical. All you guys, just bear with me. But again, that's why, campaigns for justice exist, because, this is a part of organizing. Like, we can go up and just bust up the sheriff's department, but we have to have a strategic plan, and we have to win the people to understanding what happened, to these girls, and changing the narrative and all of these different kinds of things. So organization is critical in resistance, and that's what we are building, today. So going to take a few more questions. I see some, and just Uhuru, salute to all of you again tuning in. Really want to appreciate it. I can't get to your questions fast enough. Gosh, you guys are going. Uhuru Kalumbai, Uhuru, president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. Uhuru, again, self-critical for the sound. Hoping everything works out. Okay. All right. So for this next portion, I just want to call on everybody, who is watching this web conference right now to, support this campaign and, materially support this campaign, because the work of the Justice for the Through Brown Black Girls, it is a part of a strategy to African liberation. It is a campaign of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, which is the mass organization under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And, when we're talking about getting organized, again, this is what it looks like. And, this campaign is fighting for, not just the lives of these African girls, but for the lives of all African children. And we do that by fighting for demands and winning demands. And, you know, some of the demands are Black community control of the police, where African people have the ability to hire, fire, train, and discipline those who should function with arms in our community. That's a solid, just, democratic demand that African people have a right to. And it's something that we can win when we organize around it. So Black community control of the police is a demand of this campaign. We want to fire and indict all of those killer deputies, sheriff's deputies, who were responsible for the murder of these 3 girls. We want, you know, the Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, who oversees the entire sheriff's department. He has got to go. He has got to go, and he has to go to jail because he oversaw these murders. He also oversaw the murders of, you know, 3 African teenage boys early, you know, just recently on August 6th, actually. Keontae Brown, Jimmy Goshi, and Desiree Thomas, in an eerily similar case, you know, were chased to their death in a fiery car accident, you know, by these sheriffs. And, you know, if you are familiar with even Florida laws, there's this whole no chase policy, but it's a chase policy if you're African. So, you know, they have to go to jail. They have to be indicted. They have to rot in prison. And, you know, these are demands of the campaign. And we're also calling for reparations to the families of these girls, reparations to Kunde and Mwamvita, you know, for the stolen African lives. And, you know, these things have to be made a reality, but it can only be made a reality with your contribution, with your support. And we are still in the process of raising $18,000 for the legal fees of this campaign. And because, like I said earlier, you know, we are fighting on the grounds, you know, to win the understanding politically of this campaign, but we're also taking it into the courtroom because, again, we want to see these sheriff's deputies held accountable to the African community. You know, Kunde Mwamvita has to see justice for her children, and that only happens when, you know, the perpetrator has experienced the same pain that this mother has had to experience. They have to go to prison. They have to go to prison. And Bob Gualtieri's mother has to feel the pain of what Kunde Mwamvita had to experience. And so we're calling on you guys to make whatever contribution that you can to the $18,000 towards the legal fees. And to do that, you can go to justice4dominiquebattle.com and, you know, contribute and help us reach this goal of $18,000. The legal attorney of this case, Aaron O'Neill, has already gone through the process of, you know, filing the intent to sue the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. And we want to really move on that and begin the investigative process as soon as possible. So anybody here right now, we have a goal to raise $1,000. That is our goal tonight, and we know it's possible. We know we can raise $1,000. So anybody on here want to be the first one to go ahead and contribute and say, you know, how much are you going to contribute to this campaign? Again, anything is appreciated, and we really want to meet this goal tonight of $1,000 towards the overall $18,000 for the legal fees. So, you know, who is our first taker? I'm going to try to work the comments. And Casey is going to be facilitating the comments. So just make sure that, you know, if you are going to donate, please let us know. I want to shout you out on here. And but if you prefer to do it anonymously too, you can just go to justice4dominiquebattle.com, go to the site and make your contribution as well. And we want to be able to thank you all for your contribution. So please, you know, let us know, you know, what's going on. How much are you willing to contribute to this campaign? But we have to support this campaign. We have to support, you know, getting justice for Dominique, Lanai, and Ashanti. You know, we have to support, you know, the ability for African people to, oh, sorry, 1 second. We got 50 from 4 feet. Thank you. Actually, Casey, if you can do this, can you please text me who donates? Because I can't really see in the comments. It's like moving kind of slow. So I want to be able to make sure I don't miss anyone. But Ahuru 4 feet, thank you so much for your contribution. All right. And thank you for everybody who's like defending this campaign in the comments. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you, Casey. Uhuru. I'm self-critical. I'm trying to like work it in the comments, but Casey, if you could please just hook me up with that. Again, visit justice number 4, dominiquebattle.com. 30 from Kristen in USM. Uhuru, Kristen. Again, Uhuru, shout out to Faux Feet from St. Louis. Shout out to Kristen. So come on, y'all, don't be shy. This is the time. I mean, I know y'all, there's, a lot of money being pumped into this, commercial holiday, this genocidal holiday. Yeah, I mean, people done grocery shopped, till they couldn't grocery shop no more. You finna stuff your face. Let's, stuff the account just for the 3 Young Black Girls. Let's raise these $18,000 today, to achieve the demands of this campaign, to bring the Sheriff's Department down on their knees, to win Black community control of the police, reparations to Kunde and, the families of Dominique, Lanai, and Ashanti. We can make this happen. We definitely need you guys, though. Shout out to Dexter Uhuru, $20 from Dexter. Really appreciate you, comrade. Let's keep it going. Who's going to contribute next? Who's going to match these comrades? Go ahead and say what you're going to, what you're willing to donate, how you're willing to support this campaign. And I'm trying to watch the comments like a hawk as well. But please support this campaign. And, just everything that you heard tonight, what we've been talking about African and Indigenous liberation. This campaign is a part of doing that. I mean, it's not separate from that. It's, a strategy to forward that plan. And so we need, if you appreciate everything you heard tonight, if you unite with what you heard tonight, African and Indigenous people have to be free, down with this colonial system, down with the police murdering African children, then, you should donate. You should be willing to donate and, support this campaign. And we got Comrade Robert Uhuru with $10. Uhuru, comrade, appreciate you. Also, Hallie says there's 11 people at the USM in Boston. Uhuru, and from Bekura we have $10. From David Rold we have $20. Uhuru. I'm seeing some things come in. Okay. Okay. And I hope you guys can hear me still. I'm not sure. Just let me know. Let me know if you can hear me. Technical difficulties are happening. Okay. And I'm going to try to, I know Casey is adding this up as well, so Uhuru. Here we go. 25 from Amanda. Uhuru, Amanda. 10 from Kota. Uhuru, Kota. Thank you so much. Uhuru, yes, people are waking up. The people are waking up. We have Vicky. Thank you for the awesome awareness. No problem. This is what we do. Political education is so critical, because we have to understand, the worldview of colonized African people, because you can go to any news source of white colonial media and they'll just pump all this information into you. Not only are you forced into 12, 13 years of colonial education, but then all the news media around you is constantly reinforcing the ideas of this social system. And so it is our job as a revolutionary organization to always constantly politically educate the masses to understanding the worldview, the international worldview of colonized African people. And because nowhere in your local white power media newspaper are they going to tell you that Africans have to be free, Indigenous people have to be free, Indigenous people, have a right to their land. There's no way you're going to ever read that anywhere unless it's coming from, a revolutionary organization, and that being the African Socialist Party. So no problem. I don't know what this person's talking about. Oh, okay. So we have a total of 80 from Boston, 20 from Marissa in Seattle, Uhuru, 20 from an anonymous donor in Boston, Uhuru Anonymous. Thank you all so much for your contributions, but keep them coming. We still have some time. Submit your questions that aren't related to trolling. Thank you very much. And, we really appreciate your questions and comments in support of this campaign. 25 from Miezi. Thank you, Madre. Thank you for your support of Just for the Through Drowned Black Girls campaign. Thank you so much. And keep it coming, y'all. Keep it coming. This is great. We, again, everything counts. Every dollar counts. We really appreciate it so much. For everybody for tuning in support of this campaign. Again, the goal tonight is $1,000, and reminder of where you can go to donate justice number 4 DominiqueBattle.com. If you have check or cash, you can mail it to 3DBG campaign, and the address is 1245 18th Avenue South. So, and we can go ahead and put that information in as well. And also, if you're writing a check, it's to Justice for Dominique. So, and it's all spelled out, Justice for Dominique. So you guys can, commit to that as well. So if you're paying by card, you can go online to the GoFundMe site, or if you want to pay in cash and check, then those are some alternatives as well. So everybody is able to contribute in these different ways. If it's, difficult for you to do it in a different way. So don't feel restricted by that. We will make accommodations. But Casey's texting me now. Uhuru. Okay. Janer? Is that how you say it? Janer? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Uhuru. Shout out to you, Janer, in Boston for $20, donating $20. Thank you so much. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. Uhuru. Uhuru. Oh, Shanae. My bad. I'm self-critical, comrade. Thank you for the $20 out in Boston. Really appreciate it, everybody. Again, for your support of this campaign. And I'm going to be closing it out soon, but again, I want to make sure that we get everybody's donations and we get everybody shouted out. $25 from Alyssa. Thank you, Alyssa, for your contribution. Really appreciate it. And I hope I'm not missing anyone, but I'm going to go ahead and close it out soon. Oh, Vicky. Vicky says $20. Thank you so much, Vicky. $20 from Vicky. Oh, and Robin. Yes, girl, comrade, you can bring, your $25 tomorrow to the office. Yes, you can do that. We really appreciate it. Thank you. So we got 25 from Robin. African workers. Uhuru. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you so much, everyone. Uhuru Diakiese. Uhuru. Thank you so much. Diane, $10. And $10 from Samantha. We're going to get this info down for you. Make sure that it's all, from anybody who wants to know where to donate. Casey is putting the links in the comments. So if you go in the comments, you can see the link of, where you can donate. Again, it's justice number 4, DominiqueBattle.com. The link is in the description. We have, so from Penny Lau, I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but I think it's Penny. Again, the donations are going to the legal fees of the campaign. So we are fighting not only on the political front, but we also have an attorney who is over this case, who is going to be conducting a real thorough investigation. And it's obscene how much legal fees cost for people to, like you have to get all these things done, like discoveries, people to actually, all these different kinds of investigators and professionals and things like that to go out there and conduct a solid investigation to bring all of this, like, to gather up all this concrete evidence to be able to present it in court. So that's why we're raising these resources. Again, it's for the legal fees of this campaign so that the attorney can be able to do the work that he needs to do to win, the demands of this case, to, if anything, see these killers responsible for this death in prison. So that's where the resources are going to. Question from Doug in Gainesville: have you worked with WMNF to raise funds? We haven't worked with WMNF, and quite frankly, a lot of, these radio stations, these media outlets are, again, media for white power, and they'll be the same one. I mean, we've discussed this case on WMNF before. In fact, when I was running for District 6 City Council in St. Pete, and Jesse Neville, who's the chair of the True Solidarity Movement, was running for mayor in the city, we talked, about this case, but they always reference it as, they always, just say the same slanderous thing that every other colonial media outlet says. Oh, they stole a car, they deserve to die, well, they did this, so of course this had to happen. That's basically their line, because that's the line of white power, that's the line of the sheriff's department. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but that's just been our relationship with WMNF. That's why, but we have our own, but that's why the Uhuru movement has created our own institutions, so that we don't have to rely on, stations owned by white power. I mean, we have our own newspaper, Burning Spear newspaper, and we have our own radio station now, which is Black Power 96.3 FM. And you can listen to it if you're in St. Pete, or you can download the app, or you can listen to it anywhere. You download Black Power 96, you can listen to, a radio station that is speaking in the interest of and from the viewpoint of the African working class, and it's owned by the African working class. So, instead of going through these outlets, we go through and create our own. And that's what it has to be about, independence, African independence, self-reliance apart from this system, because we can't expect them to do it for us, work in our interests. It's built at our expense. So obviously it's not going to work for us. So, it's important that we created these different institutions. So, yeah. Uhuru to Penny Hess. Thank you so much. She contributed $20 today, Uhuru. We got 525 so far. So again, our goal is 1,000. So let's try to reach that goal. Oh, Uhuru. Penny, yeah, Kunde donated $20. Uhuru Kunde. And Uhuru, Penny, Penny says she is with Lanaya Miller's family, and I just want to, express, my appreciation for you coming on. And, I would love to have a discussion with you apart from this web conference to talk about, the case and everything it is that we've been involved in that I can't get out, all right now because we're limited on time. But it's really nice to, hear from you. And I look forward to talking to you around this case. So thank you so much for tuning in. We have $25 from Comrade Aisha, the International Director of APDEP. Uhuru, Comrade, thank you so much, Aisha. All right. So we have a few more minutes, comrades. Again, keep those donations coming. And even when we end here, you can still contribute at any point in time. You can go to justice4dominiquebattle.com and continue to donate. If you're feeling you got a paycheck next Friday, you're feeling really excited, go to this website because you remember it, because you are, in unity and support of this campaign, go to this website on that paycheck day and go ahead and donate to this campaign, because we have to reach this goal. We have to reach this goal. So keep it coming. Keep it coming. And Huru Kiongozi. Huru. Really appreciate all of you guys for being on. Again, this is our second episode of a monthly web series. And next month, we will be talking about African families. And, you know, again, it'll be another consumer holiday where white people are, getting prepared to celebrate, this thing called Christmas or whatever. And, meanwhile, we're going to dive into, the African family's reality, during this period, because the whole white life, it's completely two different realities for African people and white people. There's the colonizer and there's the colonized, and we live two completely different lives, one at the expense of the other. And we're going to be talking about African families in December. So, stay tuned with us every month. Come back on, get some really good political education, and, learn more ways about how you can support this campaign. And we really, really appreciate you guys tuning into our second webinar. And I really enjoyed having this discussion. And because it's just important to know that this isn't, one, going into this holiday, if you don't know, now you know, kind of thing. If you haven't even been politically made aware of the reality of this holiday that people are so frantic right now to participate in, it's very important to understand that, because it changes our reality. It changes the way we look at life. And, it's a great change. It's how we have to look at life as it really is, because we have to be involved in changing it. We have to be involved in changing it. And, we have to see in our lifetime freedom for African and Indigenous people. And we will see freedom in our lifetime. That will be a reality, just as much as a reality as it will be when we get justice for these three girls. So, if there is nothing else, I want to again appreciate everybody for being on our second webinar, and remind you guys to stay tuned for our announcements for the next webinar. Just mark it down in your calendar once we start putting out that information, and just get into the habit of starting to register for these monthly web series. Thank you all so much to the committee for Justice for the Three Drowned Black Girls for all the hard work that you guys do to put on this event. A salute to everybody who donated. You guys will be receiving thank yous. We really appreciate it so much. And again, continue to donate online, justice4dominiquebattle.com. And we will catch you next month in December talking about African families. Thank you all so much. Justice for Dominique, Lanai, and Ashanti. Uhuru.